he motivates, he's fired up in those moments that people maybe don't care about.
He's following in the footsteps of Martin Johnson and obviously Owen Jones.
Won a test series.
The only guy on tour that's won one.
I think that speaks volumes.
As a teammate, he's the sort of guy that you 100% want on your team. He's an out-and-out competitor. He's got edge. He's a little bit angry for the fly half, which you don't often get. Yeah, but you absolutely want as a player. Sexton had it. Bigger had it.
He does have big match temperament, which matters in these types of tournaments.
I just love what Pollock does. I love the way he approaches the game. I love his energy, his speed, his reading of the game. He's got a little bit of that early Richie McCaw about him for me.
You need more than just tricks up your sleeve from first and second phases when you're playing against quality teams.
My head says the Lions are going to win the first test and probably get 3-0.
Hello and welcome to the Lions Halfway Point with talkSPORT and TENA Men. Keep control with TENA Men and join the conversation at TENA Men UK. We are off the back of the 6 warm-up matches, and the first Lions test against Australia in Brisbane is just around the corner. So who better to dissect everything we've got going into the test series than former Lion Lewis Moody and former 2-time Lion Jamie Heaslip, and from Australia, none other than George Gregan. Right, let's start with you, Lewis. How excited now the test series is here?
Oh, so excited, mate. The build-up to this Lions tour is something, as a player that you've experienced, it's just one of those things you almost want to get back into. I want to climb into it myself, but seeing some of the players that have had the opportunity to step up and taken it, that's been the most exciting bit for me. I don't know about you, Jamie.
I'm unbelievably excited. Every 4 years this comes around, pinnacle for all the players, and then just to see all the different fans come together under the red jersey is pretty powerful, and it's setting itself up for a nice test series.
And what about the green and gold, George? In your perspective, how are you feeling?
Everyone's really excited back here in Australia. I think you can see that from the fact that there's a lot of green and gold talking about it, but also we saw on the weekend in Adelaide that there's a lot of red jerseys around supporting and building up to the game. So it's turning out to be a spectacular series.
Yeah, that sea of red arriving every day. Let's dive into the Lions, Lewis. What have you made of the tour so far?
Oh, it's difficult, isn't it? It's a difficult one because, the games, they maybe haven't been as one-sided as I probably would have thought. I thought the Lions would have, grown in consistency from that first game against Argentina, which, you play the 5th best side in the world, you lose. It's not a great start to the series, but they've gradually built. But I don't think the Aussie opposition, no disrespect to Georgie, who's on the other end of the phone, but the opposition, doesn't feel like it's really tested the Lions yet. And I'm intrigued, I suppose I'm really intrigued to see where Farrell goes next, in terms of selecting the squad.
I think they have a wobbly start in Dublin against Argentina, and they've grown in terms of their consistency in attack, but I think the defence and the breakdown has let them down a little bit. And against some of these teams that they played, again, no offence to them, but you're kind of looking at the possession and territory numbers, and some games only winning by 10, 12 points, and you're kind of wondering, are they leaving the door open too much to someone like a Joe Schmidt who can unpick the weaknesses in them defensively? With what is a dangerous side, and knowing Joe as well, the tactician that he is, he'll come up with a couple of plays that leverage the strength of Australia and their ability to play kind of heads-up rugby. Kind of really sets the scene for a very interesting first test this weekend.
Right, a little bit more on that later, I reckon. You've both said, by the way, no offence, he's on the other side of the world.
Sorry, George.
Feel free to offend, George.
I don't think you should be worried about being offended. It's fine, because I think, these were always going to be games which you're just building into what is ultimately this week, which is the test match. So there's going to be some trials, some tribulations, there's going to be some stuff they're holding back. I don't think, from Joe Smith's perspective, the Wallabies had a tight. I'm sure we'll go into it later, but I think it sets up for a great sort of build up to the first test to see what might happen and what will they showcase.
Yeah, stick a pin in that one. But now let's hear from Lions head coach Andy Farrell speaking after the victory over that Australia-New Zealand Invitational 15, which, let's be honest, was a walk in the park.
Oh, I did okay. We did okay, yeah. So, as did many others tonight. There's some great individual performances, wasn't there? But I suppose how those individual performances gel together as a collective, and I thought it was a professional team performance, because the tricky ones. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. When you play against a side that's got all the talent that they have, but you know, they've had 7 or 8 days to come together. You know, if you give them a sniff and give them belief, then it becomes a hard day at the office. But I thought we was very professional in the way that we went about most of our business today.
Jamie, how would you respond to what Andy Farrell says and what you make of the opposition that the Lions have faced?
Well, I think that invitational side, I actually think that was probably more like a Babas side for those guys, or Babas week, if I'm honest. And no offence to them again. Sorry, gotta stop saying no offence. But I think
there's a lot of apologies going on here.
Yeah, I think with the way I look at it is, it's interesting hearing Andy saying, "Damn if you do, damn if you don't." I think there's more pressure on the Lions, and Australia are very much the underdogs in this, and that will sit with them really well. They've nothing to lose. There's a lot of pressure on the Lions. They have everything to lose. So for Australia, that's a really dangerous Australian side to face here, where they have there's no real expectations around them. They're playing for a bit of pride, all right, and maybe setting themselves up for the World Cup in 27. But that's a dangerous thing when you're coming up against a side where they have nothing to lose, and the Lions, all that pressure on them. I think you only have Owen Farrell is the only person who's won a Test series with the Lions, who's in that squad, and that pressure, that weight of expectation. I'm quite interested to see how mentally they deal with that.
It was a great opportunity, wasn't it, for the guys that, you know, maybe outside bets for that Test side to step up and delivered, and a number of them did. You know, Earl Van der Merwe, who's had a shaky sort of tour so far, Ben White, who's come in. Yep. But the thing for me, I suppose, which was important in this game, which I hadn't really seen in others, was get the start. You know, the Lions in too many of the games so far have conceded early, and they've not been clinical enough in the red zone. Now, yes, the quality of the opposition looked like maybe they'd enjoyed that week, like you suggested, a little bit too much. But they were clinical, they took the opportunities, and they started strong. So, but more importantly, for the guys that are pushing for a Test start, it was a nice chance for them. So Earl did a good job. And
on to Jamie's point, George, are the Aussies laying a bit of an ambush potentially for the Lions?
I wouldn't necessarily say an ambush, but they're going in sort of, you're 6 games into your tour, and I know there's been different squads and different sort of combinations tried throughout all that. The Wallabies got together a bit over 12 days ago or 14 days ago. They played against Fiji, who are a great team and dangerous, and you saw what they did with Scotland on the weekend. They're just hard. They're hard to play, particularly off unstructured rugby, and they nearly snatched that Test match. So they'll go in underprepared. There were some positive signs. Actually saw Joe Smith and Laurie Fisher in the Canberra game against the Brumbies. And they were just saying, you know, like there was a bit of rust. There was probably the first 20 odd minutes. There was a quarter of the game they were happy with, and then he paused. So there's work to do for all teams. And I think they'll see through, I think, the Brumbies match and definitely the Waratahs, some opportunities to disrupt the rhythm and speed. And I think just the way that the Lions can dictate with their attack, because when they get quality ball, you've got wonderful players across the field, particularly Gibson Park, and also Finn Russell. They can just move the ball to space. They can have players around them. It makes it very difficult to defend. So when that ball's quick, they eventually run out of numbers defensively. So I think they'll be looking at that. How do you stop the rhythm of the Lions? And then also, you've got to score points in Test match rugby. It's not about stopping the opposition. You've got to play as well.
George, you are outnumbered currently. Let's see if we can redress the balance a little bit. There's plenty of selection headaches facing Andy Farrell, but one man who will definitely be starting this weekend is Lions captain Maro Itoje. So have a listen to what former England head coach Eddie Jones said about him recently on talkSPORT.
I think, you know, players go through various stages of their career, and I think Maro has got to that more mature stage of his career where he's really comfortable in himself, and I think because of that, he's giving more of himself to his teammates. And certainly, yeah, his display in the last Six Nations as captain of England would point to the fact that I was 100% wrong in that statement. But I might have been right at that time.
I see. You might have been right at the time, but you might end up having to hold your hands up and say, okay, I was proven wrong. Do you back the decision, Eddie, to make him captain?
Yeah, I think it's a great decision, mate. You know, and just watching him play on last night, he's got that zest back for his game. I think, you know, and the guys on the show know better than me, but, you know, players go through little periods in their career where your energy, you know, ebbs and flows a little bit. And he had a little bit of low probably in his late 20s. And but now he seems to have got it all back, and he's back to his, dynamic, energetic, defensive self.
So Eddie's on board. Lewis, you were a former captain yourself. You played under one of the greats in Martin Johnson. What do you make of Maro?
Do you know what? Ever since he broke onto the scene, I thought he had that sort of leadership quality about him. That was just from observing him play. The manner Eddie spoke about, his energy. He's got that Ben Earl, which, some people like, some people don't. He motivates, he's fired up in those moments that people maybe don't care about when you win a scrum. And he's there supporting everyone. He's got a hand on the back, he's shouting. But what you don't see with Maro, if you just watch him as a player, is how different he is as a personality, how relaxed he is. What a thinker he is in terms of, a deep thinker of the game, his understanding. And when you listen to him talk, he's such a complex and nuanced individual that I've been absolutely fascinated by him as a leader, and I think he's a great appointment. And I know we spoke about this earlier, but there probably would have been another captain if he'd stayed fit.
Yeah, I think, and kind of the talk in Ireland at the time was if Caelan Doris hadn't gotten injured, he was probably going to be captain. But saying that, I think Maro, the captains I've had over my career, Paul O'Connell, Brian O'Driscoll, Sam Warburton in 2013, the best leaders are actually not the ones who are shouting or talking the most, but leading by example. And I think on this tour in particular, and this kind of last season too, Maro has come back and found the great form that he had when he broke onto the international scene. And particularly the last couple of games, he has been leading by example with the carries, with the rucks, with the work rate, with the defensive efforts, with the double, triple efforts. And I think he's really leaned into leading by example, and that's what Andy Farrell wants from his captain. He's also lucky; he's got a ton of leaders underneath him as well, which probably offloads a lot of the work. But that's the best way of bringing players together. For going, hey lads, follow me. I'm going to show you how it's done, particularly in a Lions jersey.
And a deep thinking man of action in the second row as a captain was John Eales, I guess. But George, your perspective on Maro?
Yeah, Maro, well, he's following in the footsteps of Martin Johnson and obviously Alwyn Jones as number 4 or 5 who led the Lions in a really positive way and through action. Yeah, as you said, it's not always about a big, deep and motivational, emotional speech before games and before training. It's about just doing your job consistently, asking that of the players, setting the standards yourself with your own performance, be it training, be it playing, but then also having that ability to relate to your players and have some time off. And he is that sort of character. I like everyone, I'm in total agreement. When I first saw him come onto the scene, he's thinking this guy's going to be, he's a shoo-in to be an English captain. Just the way that he played, the energy, the skill set, but also I think over time, what I really like, particularly what I've seen so far on the tour, is just his maturity and his emotional control, dealing with the man in the middle, because at times that can be difficult. I'll put my hand up on that. I sometimes didn't get that right. And I think that's a really key piece. And I think the players play for him. You can see that they're enjoying themselves in a really positive way. And I think getting that piece is really important. And then there's always the edge of playing. And I'm sure they'll ramp it up a little bit, and he'll do that, be it through words, but also through his action in the lead up to a test week. And you've got to remember, this is his third Lions tour, so he's calling upon that experience and people he's played under and played with to draw upon to get themselves ready for this test match. So total agreement. I think he's a great choice. And yeah, Eddie's not one to normally say that he may have got it wrong, but he saw something in Maro which he can fully see blossom now as a leader and a captain of the British and Irish Lions.
And that emotional intelligence that George spoke about, Jamie said about him being the kind of guy that you respect, you want to climb over the trenches with him, you would, because he'll be there leading by example. But that, Martin Johnson recognised, we go back to 03, which I'm sure George will hate, but he was that big character that can be imposing on the referees. So actually, Maro has the intelligence to know when to assert himself, how to do it, the body language that's required of him to make sure he gets the best out of those decisions from the ref.
Another one of Eddie Jones is one of the guys he did have as his captain. Owen Farrell is now on tour. I'll throw it open. What role does Owen Farrell have in a test series, do you think?
Well, he's won one. He's won a test series.
The only guy on tour that's won one.
I think that speaks volumes. I mean, I'm actually curious. Being an Irishman here, I'm quite curious. Like, is there a sense of nepotism around this decision bringing him in. I don't think there is. I think he's a quality player. He's unbelievably sound off the field. But I'm curious to see what's the vibe here in the UK.
Well, I was at the Rugby World Cup in France, and it did anger me, irritated me a bit. There were some England fans who were booing, and there was some boos at the weekend again. I think, you know what, in every story, you need a bit of a pantomime villain, and I think he takes that on his shoulders, and he showed with his performance what he's about.
But Owen divides, doesn't he? Because as a teammate, he's the sort of guy that you 100% want on your team. He's an out-and-out competitor. He's got edge. He's a little bit angry for a fly half, which you don't often get. Yeah, but you absolutely want as a player. Sexton had it, Bigger had it. And so I love watching him play because I know what he can bring to a team, but I can understand why he would irritate the pants off of fans because he's just got that edge, late shots, anything, because he's that.
The way that George used to irritate all of us up north.
Oh, everyone, everyone.
But the thing is, I totally agree with you there. It's so true, isn't it? Because he's someone who is just wanting to compete in everything. And then he also leads by example. He takes responsibility for kicking goals which win Lions series and win Lions test matches. I saw it. I was there physically in 2017 where he kicked some big goals against the All Blacks in that drawn series. So he has that big match temperament, and he has that library of big match experience, and not just experience, but execution under his belt. And whether or not he's in the 23 or if he's in the starting 15, he's around the squad, and that has such a big impact. And like there's Finn Smith, Finn Russell's been there as well in the Lions tour. But if something was to go wrong in that area, you hope not, it's great to have someone who has that sort of experience within your squad and who is still keen, eager. I saw him running extra 50s and whatever it was down Canberra Stadium. It was pretty damn chilly. I was very happily retired at the time, but the guy is still motivated to contribute to his team in a really positive way, be it on the field, supporting the leaders and passing on that experience in a really positive manner.
Class. We've got two former Lions back rowers here. So come on, pick your back row for the Test series. No two people agree, it seems.
Yeah. And we were debating this. we definitely didn't agree, but I love that it's so close, and I love that there's so much debate around it because, Sam Warburton, someone whose opinion I respect highly, he'd been really talking up Jack Morgan, his ability at the breakdown, the turnovers that he's won. I don't know whether that's just because, he's another Welshman, and obviously Sam wants a Welshman in the side, but there is absolutely no chance in my mind that Andy Farrell is going to pick purely just because you need a quota of, representation across. So that's not going to happen. So for me, do you go safe, or do you have a bit of safety and are prepared to pull the trigger on a bit of risk? I would love to see, and I think if I tell you my back row, which I believe will be Josh van der Flier at 7, Conan at 8, and for pulling the trigger, someone, we talked about energy and what Maro brings. I just love what Pollock does. I love the way he approaches the game. I love his energy. He covers 3 different positions, which allows for a bit of nuance on the bench if you need it. But if you want that risk with safety, he's a line-out option as well. But his speed, his reading of the game, I don't want to egg him up too much, but he's got a little bit of that early Richie McCaw about him for me in terms of deciding when he's going to impact.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing about this back row headache is, like, take Josh van der Flier, right? It's going to be him or Jack Morgan, and there's going to be no spot for him on the bench. So they're either in or they're out. Around 6, where I think Pollock, it's really between Pollock and Earl on the bench who's going to get the spot. And then I think at 6, I think he's going to go with a Tadhg or Chesham. And again, they'll swap like for like and put them on the bench, purely because I think the Lions need really strong set-piece launch to really get into this game, get really direct rugby, and that's where having the Tadhg or Chesham in the line out, as well as around the field, kind of add to the options that they have. But again, I mean, the quality that they have, they can swap like for like all over the place, but it's a headache. But for me, it's probably going to be Byrne, Conan, and I actually think it's going to be Jack Morgan, which kills me because I'd love to see Josh there.
I actually think Curry, Morgan, Conan, but I'd love to know from a halfback who you'd least like to play, I guess is the question.
My 2 cents worth is the Lions want to play that up tempo. We spoke about that earlier. To do that, you have to be really good at the ruck. You have to clear really good ball, be really efficient at the breakdown and not waste too many bodies. So the back row is really important. They've got to win the race. They've got to beat the Wallaby players to the race, and then they've got to be really effective. So my inkling would be, this is my my 2 cents, I'd go Jack Morgan. I thought Jack would be the person who's just going to be that mongrel dog on the floor, plays well against Australia, etc. But really good problems to have. I did like Tom Curry because we know what he brings, and Conan. But you've got those options, and I like the back row options that you had with your 5-3 split, where you bring on Pollock, who's some player. Like you mentioned, Richie McCaw. I see parts of a Hooper / Georgie Smith, but that's kind of my take on it. You've got a plethora of options in your back row, which is great to have.
As we're midway through the show, we wanted to take a break at halftime to discuss something important off the pitch that affects men across the globe. So today's show is brought to you by TENA Men, who are proud partners of Prostate Cancer UK. Their aim, to use the brotherhood of sport to combat this taboo subject, so men take the time to talk and take action for their health and their mates. 1 in 8 men will get prostate cancer, and more than 12,000 men die from the disease every year in the UK alone. So it's something that needs to be discussed. Check your risk in 30 seconds by heading to Prostate Cancer UK. And Lewis, this is something that's touched your life recently.
Not me personally, but a good friend of mine. So one of the teams that I coach down in Southwest, the Bath under 15s, one of my fellow coaches was diagnosed a year ago with prostate cancer. And off the back of that, it's not even something I'd thought about, to be honest, until he brought it up, saw all the struggles he went through. Thankfully, touch wood, all was okay. But it made us start talking about it and debate it. And I'd put it off for years because the thought of having someone else's finger in my hoop, quite frankly, was something I wasn't that keen on. But chatting to him, he was like, look, just go down. It's really easy now. You can get a check, simple as you like. It's just a blood test, and you can get it all sorted. So, for me, seeing him go through what he did, it preempted all of us to go down there and make sure we got ourselves checked out. Because if you get it early, like any of these cancers, it can be sorted.
And I guess this conversation's timely and poignant given the recent diagnosis of, a Lions legend, maybe the Lions legend, Sir Ian McGeechan.
Yeah, I think, a problem shared is a problem halved. And I think the idea of all of us discussing these things as we all kind of get older in age and whatnot is important. And to remove any sort of taboo around it is important for share with your teammates, your friends, and have those kind of open, honest, kind of vulnerable kind of conversations around it. And you see the stats, it's 1 in 8 will get it, but there's also like a 90% success rate with early detection. And if it's a simple kind of blood test now, I think it's something that we should all discuss, and we should all be pushing our friends and teammates to go down and get checked and get sorted and get dealt with nice and early.
Well, in terms of open conversations, you've spoken about this in the past before, George. Do you think there's enough knowledge and awareness?
Well, I think the more we have these conversations, the better it is for everyone in the community, and particularly for men of our age and beyond, just to be aware that it's something which is your health is, to me, is your wealth. So why would you jeopardise that? And if it means going to a regular checkup, like for me personally, I have an annual checkup, and with my bloods, exactly what Lewis was saying, those types of screenings can be added into it, and then you can be just saying, okay, everything looks normal. If there's an issue, you can get early diagnosis and detection, then you can crack on. And if a 90% sort of success rate of getting early detection, then that's really positive. So I can't stress enough for men of our age to be looking after themselves, and don't be too proud, and don't feel like you can't talk about it, because it's that stage of life that we're going into, and early detection, early diagnosis, and taking care of your own health is so important.
I guess baked into being, elite rugby players, as you all were, is that kind of brotherhood of your team and that camaraderie with your mates and stuff. And there's probably a lot of conversations that happen just off the cuff, whether it's in the bar after training or whatever. But I guess post rugby, you have to proactively have those conversations.
Yeah, you have to make the effort, don't you? Because you don't have the proximity of those people around you. Well, we don't speak for myself, I certainly don't. So going out there, making the effort, and recognising as well, if you see someone struggling or they look a little bit down, going and asking that question, 100%. I mean, I was of an era, and maybe we all were, where talking openly about your experiences, certainly private like this, was not something you did. So airing it, definitely the best way forward.
And I guess if one man off the back of this conversation goes and gets a check, that could be a life saved. And this is sons, dads, brothers that are needlessly losing years of their life, George.
Yeah, so true. And I think that's the piece. And I think the more you talk about things, I remember being involved. My son was diagnosed with epilepsy, and that was a bit of a taboo subject as well, from a neurological disorder, and everyone was sort of saying, oh, we don't talk about it. But the more you talk about these things, you realise, hang on, no, this happens in society, and it's not even 2 or 3 degrees of separation, if you know what I mean, in terms of you will know someone who has had some sort of experience, be it with what we're talking about or with other sort of conditions. So, no, I think, as they talk about, you need a village of people to look after each other. And I think this is what it's about. So speak about it, be proactive and support each other, and go out and get that early diagnosis. And hopefully that requires just you talking about it and having these conversations where it's not taboo.
Top man. So check your risk in 30 seconds by heading to prostatecanceruk.org. You can also call 0800 074 8383 to speak to a specialist in confidence, or use the live chat instant messaging service online, and everything you need can be found at prostatecanceruk.org. Let's turn our attention to the Aussies then, and hear from Wallaby legend Matt Giteau speaking about how prestigious a Lions series really is.
Well, I think it's like a lot of players here. They've kind of said that it actually means more to them than a World Cup. Really? I've been involved in 2 World Cup finals. I played in a World Cup final with Willie Gagné in 2015, and he was saying that the Lions series seemed bigger than a World Cup final. Wow. But just because you only get that opportunity. Like, I played professional rugby for 20 years, but I didn't play in one Lions series. So when I toured for Australia, it was 2002. They toured Australia 2001. When they came in 2013, I'd already signed to go to France. So, like, these opportunities are rare and they're incredibly special. So this it does mean a lot to the group, and I think from a broader public, you're talking about trying to get rugby back on track. If we do well in this Lions series, it's such a great lead up into we've got the Men's World Cup in 2027, then the Women's World Cup in 2029. It's a great opportunity for us to grow the game and get it popular again.
We always think about how massive a Lions series is for the countries up here, but your thoughts on those comments, George?
He's spot on. He got his math right. Old Gits. It's a 12-year cycle for a Wallaby player, or for an All Black, or for a Springbok. So you might like Gits, you might like Nathan Sharp and others not play against the Lions in a 100+ career of test. And so that shows the enormity and just how hard it is for it to fill in with your career, but then the opportunity that you just don't get again. So in that time, you play 3 World Cups if you're a consistent player. And if you're a consistent Lion, you'll play 3 Lions tours. But for that hosting nation, it's once every 12 years. So it's big. And you can sense that with, obviously, as I said last week, we're in Adelaide on the weekend, more and more Red Sea, more and more Red Lion supporters. You're taking over the city in a really fun and really positive way. And that's going to just build up to create an atmosphere, which is really unique. We play against the Springboks, we play against New Zealand, we play also against Argentina on a yearly basis, but nothing is like the Lions in terms of an experience and an occasion. 3 massive test matches on 3 consecutive weekends. The only time you do that is in a World Cup.
Well, the last World Cup for Australia was a bit of a disaster. Joe Schmidt since then has turned fortunes around. Someone you know really well. He was your coach.
Yeah.
So what tactical master plan has he got for this series, do you think?
And I was delighted after the World Cup that Joe got the gig with Australia. And I was like, okay, they're going to be in a much better place when they play the Lions. And the thing about Joe, I had Joe as head coach at Leinster from 2010 to 2013, and then as Ireland coach till I retired in 2018. He is he's a student of the game, he's a mastermind of the game, and he'll come up with loads of different trick plays and launch plays that will unpick the weakness in the Lions defence. Like, they're going hard after the ruck. We might see a couple of these Gregan balls as well, where they'll fish out that first or second defender, because they're going so aggressively after it. Also, I think he'll try and play a fast game, an unstructured game, to release the space between the 13 and winger channel for the Lions, because depending on who he selects, there's a lot of space there to got to defend. With Gary Ringrose out, who I think probably would have started if he wasn't there, probably going to be Hugh Jones. He might not be used to the system that Andy's trying to play, that aggressive off the line, close them down kind of system. And knowing Joe, he will come up with a couple of plays that lure them out and give them give the Lions the initiative to go after that channel, but they'll have that space, and they have the speed as well in the outside channels to to take advantage of that. But he's definitely going to come up with these plays, and he hasn't shown a lot with Australia to date. That will just kind of, he'll show pictures so far that they think they know what they are, but that's Joe setting them up for something else, and that's what I think you're going to see from him. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think it'll be fascinating. You know, one of the things I really wanted to ask George off of what the back you were saying in terms of, you know, Joe Schmidt having observed him, a real thinker of the game, you know, loves to try and unlock those defences. The Lions' defence has been fallible during this series, letting teams too easily cross the whitewash. But I'd love to know George's thoughts on, you talked about Gitz, you know, not playing in a Lions series, maybe a bit of a wild card, but he's brought in James O'Connor, who's potentially going to play in his second Lions series, right?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? A real maverick of a player?
Yeah, real maverick of a player. And remember, I think it was Robbie Deans took a punt on him in 2013 to start that second Test match in Melbourne, which the Wallabies had to win, having lost in Brisbane. And he stepped up. I think he scored a try. I think Cristiano Alfano kicked a goal right at the death to win that and level the series. So he does have that big match experience. And though it's 12 years ago, I actually heard him talk about himself saying, the player I am now compared to that 23-year-old is completely different in terms of game management, knowing where to pull the trigger, so to speak, put the team in the right parts of the field, and just understand my game and the team's game and how we want to approach it. So I think that's a really inspired choice. A bit like bringing Owen Farrell into the squad. It brings that level head. We've got two young number 10s in Ben Donaldson and obviously Tommy Liner, who haven't had this much experience at Test level. So that's a really positive spot for them to be. But also just quickly talking about that, the different analysis that someone like Joe Schmidt puts on any team that he's coached. He's set-piece players, be it from scrums and lineouts, are world-class. He can pick teams apart in one phase, which isn't easy to do, particularly in the modern game, but he has that ability, and I've seen the Wallabies do that. They showed some good signs against the All Blacks last year. I think it was in the Sydney Test match where they came back, but they scored a few tries from set-piece, which was really well executed. So I think there could be something there. There are a few tricks up his sleeve, so to speak, but you need more than just tricks up your sleeve from first and second phases when you're playing against quality teams. There's I guess a boredom of being really consistent and accurate, which I think ultimately the team which does that over their first test will probably be on the right side of the ledger, and we can pick apart the tactical side of it, but that's going to be really important.
Well, a little bit of X factor on top, and one man that's going to be key for the Wallabies is Joseph Suaalii. So let's hear from him speaking earlier today.
You know, these are the things you dream about as a kid. So my biggest thing is just enjoying every single moment. It could be, you know, having coffee with the boys or on the field playing. And then, you know, when I'm playing the game, is playing in every single moment. So yeah, that's what I'm doing before the game is, you know, see my family, embracing them, embracing teammates, and just trying to stay in the now. So
the guy is 6'5", an incredible athlete, good-looking rooster, and seems like a really nice bloke as well. How annoying, George. How highly do you rate this kid?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and again, I think I've mentioned it. He's a special young man. He's got a pedigree of playing rugby even at schoolboy level. Went and coached or played under Trent Robinson, one of the great rugby league coaches from Sydney City Roosters. And then, yeah, he's come over and look what he did. I remember that first test against England at Twickenham last year, playing at outside centre. He played like he'd been there for many, many test matches. And I heard you speak earlier in relation to the 13 channel, how difficult it is, like ring rows, like being able to stay tight, being able to rush, then being able to pause and push. That's stuff that he did really, really well against England and on that tour last year. And he's going to be tested. I'm sure the Lions will fancy that 12-13 channel. So his ability to defend, be it tight, put line speed, but also then wait and be patient from the players on his inside, is going to be really, really important. But he's got some wonderful touches, and I know he's going to have a lot of decisions to make, both in attack and defence. But he's up for it. He's got, again, I don't want to bang on about this term, but he does have big match temperament, which matters in these types of tournaments.
Do you know what? It's all been really, really jovial and friendly so far. But let me try and drive a wedge in. I mean, we got a guy in George Gregan, who's one of the ultimate sledgers on a rugby field in that World Cup game against New Zealand. So come on, let's have predictions for this Test series. Then, how do you see it going?
Oh, do you know what? I struggle to see past a 3-0 victory for the Lions at the minute. I do think we'll probably see a slightly different tactical approach to the game. We haven't really seen them take the points in the match. I think they'll control the scoreboard early, and if they get that first win, like George said, then they'll take it 3-0.
3-0. Jamie Heaslip.
My heart, actually, this is going to be quite controversial, I think. My heart, knowing Joe will give clarity to the Australian team, which will give them confidence. And my heart wants them to win the first game, and then the Lions win the second two, just to make it interesting.
Oh, you're going to cop some pelters for that.
But my head says the Lions are going to win the first test and probably get 3-0 and probably win by 5 to 9 points, I think, in the first test. Despite what Joe cooks up, I just think there's too much firepower, and I just think the Lions up front will control the tempo of the game, and that's where it's going to be won and lost.
3-0, George Gregan.
Yeah, I think it's going to be 2-1, the series, and it's going to be split going into Sydney. And I get a sense, you should win this first one. The pressure is on you to deliver. You've had 6 games to prepare for this. The Wallabies have only had 1, haven't played since November last year. But that puts them in a nice little position where they're going under the radar as much as you can when it's a 2-horse race and it's the Lions series. But I think they could nick Brisbane. If they win, my gut feeling is if we can win, and I say we, it's not me, I'm not out there. If the Wallabies can win the breakdown and that part of it and disrupt the rhythm of the Lions and then potentially create some scoreboard pressure, it almost looks like the first game, and that's exactly what Argentina did. And that's stating the obvious, but that was a blueprint for a team of how to beat the Lions. And yes, they're a little bit deeper into their tour, but that was a bit of a worrying sign in that first match against, as you said, the 5th-ranked team in the world, which is Argentina. But I think it could be one each going into Sydney, and best team wins on Sydney.
Bring it on. Well, enjoy the test series, gents. Thank you very much for your time, Lewis.
Thank you.
Jamie. And of course, George.
Those, Jamie.
Take care.
Perfect.
And thank you for watching the Lions Halfway Point with talkSPORT and TENA Men. Keep control with TENA Men. Join the conversation at TENA Men UK. Enjoy the first test.